And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast here on Anchor. I'm Jovan Alford. You already know who I'm joined by my guys, Harrison Brown and Keaton Nichols, to talk about Week 16 of fantasy football, aka the semifinals. Or if you're in a league like mine, round one is extended for 2 weeks because only 4 teams made the playoffs. But next year, that will change along with it being a PPR league. But that's neither here nor there. We appreciate everyone
Big
as
news,
always.
breaking news on the pod here, right from the
That is
Yeah,
big
top.
news.
that is major news. Major news. I've heard from the constituents, so
The
I gotta
tribe
make
has
it happen.
spoken.
Yeah, the tribe is focused, so I gotta make it happen for next year.
Excited.
But like I said, it's week 16, which means there's still some people left in the playoffs in your respective league. So we got to talk about everything, including the latest injuries that have come out this week that could affect your lineup and who you start and who you pick up off of waivers. So we're going to make sure we discuss all that. And also, as always, a tradition like no other, we're going to give you those anytime touchdown picks as we try to rebound from last week's 0-8 0-8 record, but we will get back
Man.
there. We will get back there in the win column. Best believe we'll get back there in the win column. But before we do all that, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live and checking out the website, totalsportslive.com. Got a lot of great content up on the website right now. Harrison just released his NFL draft notebook for the month of December. A lot of good notes and nuggets on there about QB1s, underrated small school prospects to look out for, a D2 quarterback that everybody should be on their radar, just a ton of great just notes. So if you're looking for some draft stuff to get you going, check out Harrison's notebook. And we also have Seth's waiver wire report for week 16 that went live as well. So if you're looking for some waiver guys, we're not going to really discuss them on this week's show, but if you look for some waiver guys, there's some out there. So make sure you check out Seth's waiver wire report as he drops some knowledge in there on guys you should pick up as we're getting to that point of the season. And make sure, as always, checking out the podcast here on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, lastly on Anchor. Again, we appreciate everyone that's tuned in and checked out the podcast, and just subscribing, downloading, and always you can find us at Total Sports Live TSL podcast on all your streaming platforms. But fellas, how are you doing? Keaton is back after me, Harrison, and Seth did a show last week and the week before with me and Keaton that was doing this show. So this week we have Keaton back. He's back from assignment here on the podcast. How are you guys doing this week?
Doing good, doing good. Had to take an R&R break, from last week, but I see Seth filled in beautifully, smoothly as well. That's why you have a depth chart. You build up an organization, from the ground up. No, but it's good to be back this week. I'm still in the playoffs in 2 of my 3 leagues, so I'm excited. I'm ready to get to it tonight.
Most definitely. What about you, Harrison?
Yeah, likewise, man. It was a pleasure to have Seth last week, but great to have Keaton back in the mix talking some playoff football. I mean, I feel like I've been saying it for a while, but we're really getting down to it now. If you're still tuned into this podcast, man, you got some money on the line or a trophy on the line, bragging rights, whatever it is, you got something on the line. So there's a lot at hand here this week.
There's definitely a lot at hand, and we're going to talk about it right now. And that starts with people looking for a late season QB1. So, as we all know, earlier this week, it was announced that Jalen Hurts suffered a sprained shoulder in the Eagles' 5-point win over the Bears, which, at first was not a surprise just based off the amount of hits he was taking in that game. But some of the reports that were floating around that he had a broken collarbone, which were not corroborated. It was eventually a sprained shoulder. However, it's not a long term injury. That's a good thing, but it's uncertain that he will play on Saturday, Christmas Eve, against the Cowboys. Even though we can all kind of read between the lines and know that he will likely not be playing on Christmas Eve against Dallas. So if he doesn't play, fantasy managers will have to scramble to find that reliable streamer. And we talked about streamers a lot on the podcast throughout this season. There was a ton of options in the middle of the season, and as we got past, by Mageddon a couple of times, there were some options. But now we're in week 16, and options are really thinned out, because we have Hertz is injured, Lamar is still out, Kyler Murray is hurt, Colt McCoy is hurt. Um, I'm trying to think if I'm leaving out anybody
Jimmy
else.
G.
Yeah, Jimmy G is
Jimmy G,
hurt.
Matt Stafford still hurt out in
Stafford.
LA.
Stafford is hurt. Mayfield's in. Matt Ryan got benched for Nick Foles. So yeah, the quarterback position is in a huge state of flux right now. So, fellas, when we look at streamer options and people that should pick up in the win and go home situation, because we're not talking DFS where you're just dropping a couple of dollars, plop your lineup in like me, because I'm not in nobody's playoffs anymore. You can just be like, all right, I can start whoever and whatever happens, happens. Like, no, these picks right here that we give people and quarterbacks are going to need. This is a win or go home situation here. The quarterback spot is the most important spot, no matter what uh, fancy platform you're playing on. Like this is the spot, just win or lose here. So that being said, who do y'all like as potential streamers this week? Because like I said, it's very thin and it's starting to thin out with even like we said, backups getting hurt like a Colt McCoy in last week's game against the Broncos.
Yeah, you might have to get a little creative this week. That's what I did. I'm actually in this situation in one of my leagues, so let me explain what I actually did, what I recommend also for others to do as well. But I actually went out and got Daniel Jones this week. I did. Daniel Jones has a reputation of being a game manager quarterback, but we had talked about him a few episodes back, and there was one aspect of his game that I think gives me hope. First of all, he's the 11th overall quarterback this year, so in a 12-team league, he's been worthy at least of a starting position over the course of the whole year. However, if you were starting Daniel Jones the whole year, probably not. But according to the numbers, the stats say he's the number 11 quarterback. That's kind of cool. But the one thing that we had mentioned last time, he runs the ball a lot. Up until that very episode that we were talking about, as a matter of fact, up until that point in week 12, he had carried the ball at least 5 times a game in every single game, up to that point. I don't know what the average is. I didn't do the numbers here before the show, but 10 carries last week against Washington, 12 carries the 2 weeks prior against against Washington again. 11 carries earlier in the season against Jacksonville. So he's shown that he can add value with his legs. Minnesota's defense is like, they're a good team overall, but they can be scored on, as we've seen, at least in one half or the other. So for Minnesota, I look at an opportunity to replace a quarterback with, or a QB1 rather, with a guy that also has a high chance, a high ceiling in this game. And I think that though he's a game manager, you look at what Minnesota offers defensively, which is not much, and the idea that Daniel Jones is using his legs a lot, in this offense, and there's a chance that he gets into the end zone with his legs and throwing this weekend against Minnesota. So I like Daniel Jones. That's who I put in my lineup personally. But he's over 50%, or under rather 50% available in a lot of leagues. If you're looking for a guy 50% or so or under, it's Jared Goff, though. You got to go with this guy. He's been great all year. Another top 12 quarterback kind of guy that's put up consistent numbers. But you got to, if you're otherwise out of options and Jared Goff is sitting there, or Daniel Jones is sitting there, I think you have absolutely no reason not to grab either one of these guys.
That Daniel Jones is probably the riskier option just because, like you said, just because of more so his weapons that he has around him. Like his wide receiver unit isn't great with Slayton, Hodgins, who have played well, right? They've exceeded expectations. Even Richie James has exceeded expectations. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a risky play, but like you said, when you look at the matchup, you look at his ability to pick up stuff on the ground, and it's Vikings defense, pass defense isn't great. I mean, they just gave up 33 to the Colts in a game where the Colts should have won, by the way, but
Yeah.
that's another podcast for another day. But
Mm-hmm.
when you look at all those things, it makes Daniel Jones a very intriguing option. And also, like you said, Jared Goff too, who he's been flying under the radar a lot this season. It's just seemed like he's just been each week just consistently getting better and better, and the team's starting to get better and better. And now he has a healthy wide receiver core where he has, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds as like their number 4 wide receiver, Khalif Raymond their number
Mm-hmm.
5. Oh yeah, they also got Jameson Williams back with
Mm-hmm.
his speed. So you add all that together, even though it's not a great matchup versus Carolina, he's also a very streamable option because you're not looking for Jared Goff or Daniel Jones, I would say, to score 20 points. Like, you're not looking for those guys to give you that. You're just saying, hey, if you can get me the bare minimum of 15 points, I can make do with the rest of my
Right.
roster at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Keep the roster afloat, so to speak. That's really what you're looking for. If you lost Lamar Jackson, if you lost Kyler Murray a few weeks ago, Jalen this week, you kind of have to go into it knowing that that 30-point performance that you might have been banking on for a big playoff game from them, it might be out the window at this point.
Yep.
And honestly, I'm with Keaton. I like the veterans more. I like guys like Daniel Jones. I think Jared Goff is a high upside waiver guy this week who has some potential to throw 250 and two. You know what I mean? And then you really got something going there. That's not out of the line at all for Jared Goff and how much they throw the ball and how high volume that offense is. If you're looking to get risky, it's a dangerous game. But if you did it last year with the Bears and Justin Fields when they weren't really rolling, he had a big week in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. If you're looking to get risky and go rookie, Keaton's guy Kenny Pickett has a pretty favorable matchup this week versus the Raiders. Seth put that in his waiver wire report. The Raiders
Mm-hmm.
allow the fifth most fantasy points per game this year to quarterbacks, 19.3 per game. Haven't seen a whole lot from Pickett that really tells you he's going to be a fantasy valuable guy, and he's coming off the concussion and things like that. Favorable matchup. Another favorable matchup with a favorable upside quarterback is Malik Willis taking over in Tennessee. It hasn't translated to any fantasy success so far in the two games that he started because Tennessee didn't really, open things up for him. They didn't really let him, you know what I mean, really roll in the offense. They were just trying to get through
Right.
the games, run the ball, try to get the win. Listen, you know what I mean? You're a playoff contender team. I get it. You're trying to get the win. I want to see what Malik Willis has, especially in a favorable matchup versus Houston, where even if he makes some mistakes, you should still be able to hold them offensively and play your way into the games in different ways. I would love to see Malik Willis not only get going on the ground, really opened up for him in the pass game, see if he can, get 50 yards on the ground, 150 yards throwing and a touchdown or two somewhere. You could have a play there. And then surprisingly enough, I mean, those were two of the top names in the quarterback class. Brock Purdy has been the most popular of all the rookie quarterbacks and might be the most favorable in a tough matchup versus Washington, who has a defensive line who get after it. But, over 14 points in all of his starts this year. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, certainly could be relevant this week in fantasy.
I like the trend that you were going with here with the young quarterbacks and people leaning on, because I think we all agree people at fantasy managers at this point probably get a little wary of leaning on those guys, right? Leaning on a Pickett, leaning on a Willis, leaning on a Purdy. But say if you're in a spot, right, you're in a league where, like we mentioned, Jared Goff is rostered in 50% of leagues. That means you might be in a league where you don't have him. So you might have to make the choice between Daniel Jones or taking a Malik Willis or taking a Kenny Pickett. And like you said, Pickett, he started off rough the first 5 games of his career, but he started to play mistake-free football, which is a good sign. I mean, starting to figure it out. Then, like you said, you look at the matchup, the Raiders are giving up the 7th most passing yards per game. They're also allowing quarterbacks to complete 68% of passes. So that's telling me, if I'm the Steelers offensive coordinator, which I'm not, but if I was,
Mm-hmm.
I'm dialing
I
up,
wish you were. I'm sorry.
my only qualifications is Madden.
Man, right.
But
We'll take it.
but
We'll
if
take
I'm the
it.
Steelers OC, I'm trying to get short, quick passes. Trying to not try to hit them deep because I know you want to with George Pickens. I'm working to short the intermediate game with the wide receivers, with Freiermuth, with Najee Harris, and letting those guys see what they can do in something in space. And if they can, then Pickens just as a wild card that can, maybe, again, you're not looking for 20 points, you're looking for 15. You get me to the 15-point threshold, then you got something. The same thing with Malik Willis. Willis, like you said, they didn't allow him to do anything in their first matchup, but you got to think this time around they're going to. He looked more comfortable, and when he came in for Tannehill in last week's game, which I think was a positive sign, he didn't look like he was rushed so much under center, or even when he had to, escape from the pocket to make a decision. He looked more in lockstep of what needs to get done. So I think he's another good one too. If your push comes to shove and you have like this awesome team where you're stacked at like wide receiver and running back, you can take a risk on those guys. So I'm excited to see how this plan this week pans out, because I think there's a lot of different quarterback options out there for people, and it's good. It meaning it's good.
Crunch
It's good
time.
to yeah, pretty much. It's crunch time, so you got to make decisions. But again, it's not make or break, because fantasy, even though quarterback is the most high profile position in fantasy, that's not the end all be all, because your quarterback can go off, but then your wide receivers and running backs might only score like 10 combined points. So then what?
I mean, let's also keep it real. Your defense can score 30 points this year. Your kickers
Yeah.
can score you 15. Like, it
Yep.
could really be some weird stuff that can make lineups shake. So just try to figure out someone who you trust. You know what I mean? Above double digits. You know what I mean? Get that 15-point range, like Jovan's been saying.
Yeah, I think quarterback out of all the positions to have to replace a guy that's been highly productive for you at a specific position, I do think that quarterback is probably the easiest to, close your eyes and just, hit something on the dartboard that's going to be productive for you, that's going to be good for you. I mean, name another position. The number one running back goes down. We're talking about Jalen Hurts this week, and he's a top 3 quarterback in the league, fantasy wise. And just in general. But in fantasy, top 3 guy. Name another position where you can lose a top 3 guy and you can say to yourself, I'll be all right, getting a guy off the waiver wire, or, getting a guy that's under 50 or 40 or 30% owned at this point in the year. The other positions, it's a lot more difficult where, as quarterback, you just need a solid week from a guy that maybe is a little bit more a part of the game plan than some of the predictors might have anticipated, and you've got yourself a fine fill-in, for that week. So, with quarterback, much more than some of the other positions, I think you can, breathe a little bit easier knowing that, again, get your guy that's going to get you those 15 points and leave it alone.
I mean,
Yep.
just look at Jonathan Taylor at running back and then Tyler Lockett at receiver this week. 2 top 10 guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough loss for a
Mm-hmm.
playoff team. You really better be hoping you got some developmental guys on the bench ready to roll.
Yeah, you have to. And again, at quarterback, to get to that 15-point threshold, you're looking for at least 200 passing yards and a couple touchdowns. Like you said, you hit those benchmarks, good to go. As long as you
Mm-hmm.
don't throw like 3 interceptions
You're
in
not
a
looking for
game,
upside here. Yeah.
you're just looking for that bare minimum: 200 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, good to go. Don't ask no more. Your quarterback, be happy to get what you get. So, speaking of quarterbacks, we have to talk about who would you rather start, which is something that we came up before the show, looking at a couple of interesting guys that fantasy managers might have questions about. Should I start this person over this person? Should I start this person over that person at various positions? Because, like we said, it's week 16. For a lot of leagues, this is winner go home to advance to the next round, or to potentially keep their playoff hopes alive. Well, a lot of teams, some teams might be coming off of the bye week, and this is their first matchup. So a lot of mixing and matching. You're trying to make decisions based off of injuries, based off of matchups. So we decided to come up and give you guys just some names that we floated around at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver and tight end that you might be having debates about. And let's start at quarterback, y'all. First up, Geno Smith versus Kirk Cousins. Who would you rather have
Mm.
starting in week 16?
Man, that's a really good comp for the quarterback position. Gino has been so clutch for me this year, in a league that I, for whatever reason, drafted Russell Wilson to be my starting quarterback. Foolish, right? At the beginning of the year, he ends up coming through and just consistently putting up really great numbers for me every week. He's a top 10 guy. It's hard for me to shy away from that. On the flip side, Kirk Cousins has just he's just gotten points the last couple of weeks. It's been hard to, sort of pinpoint exactly what it is that he's been doing so well in fantasy at the very least. But when you need to come back from, what was it last week, 33 at the half, you're going to be put in situations. That defense oftentimes puts him in situations where he's got to throw the ball a bunch and come back in the second half. I don't know if that's
Mm-hmm.
necessarily going to happen, though, in this Giants game, as much as I'd like to think that Daniel Jones, of course, since I put him in position to do so, is going to go off here. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen and that this is going to be as high scoring a matchup as we anticipate. But that's where Kirk Cousins has made a lot of his money in recent weeks. Second half comebacks. I'm not sure it's going to happen. So the edge to me, even though I want to go with Cousin Kirk on this one, I'm going to go with Geno, the guy that has been consistent pretty much throughout games for the most part this season.
I like Gino. What about you, Harrison? Who you starting? If it's your lineup, you're going through your phone on Sunday morning saying Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith. Who am I rolling with?
Listen, that's a favorable spot to be in. We've described some worse QB spots to be in. If you're in a
Yeah.
Lamar
Yeah,
or
right.
Jalen Hurts,
Mm-hmm.
if you've got Kirk Cousins and Geno, you're in a better spot than probably some other teams in your league. I'll say this: Kirk Cousins the past 2 weeks, man, over 425 yards both weeks. I
Yeah.
missed the boat on Kirk Cousins big time. He wound up on waivers in my league. I texted in our group chat. Keaton can tell you, Tyler Huntley or Kirk Cousins was my decision. I think Kirk Cousins has had more points in a quarter than Tyler Huntley had in those 2 games. Definitely missed the boat on that one. So I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins this one. The Giants have a scrappy and tough defense. I don't think it's going to be a 400-yard week by any stretch of the imagination. That's a better
Mm-hmm.
defense than people give credit for, especially up front. They really get after it. But I think that just that passing game overall in Minnesota is really just established. Especially after they got T.J. Hawkinson, just the strides that they've took getting more comfortable in Kevin O'Connell's system. I think that's kind of gotten lost in the Vikings' big year this year. They're in the first year of a new offensive system. Kevin O'Connell came over for the Rams. It's a much different, whole setup than they had with the Mike Zimmer staff. So I think that Kirk Cousins is a good play, but really in those two, you can't go wrong. I think Geno versus KC, that should be a high-scoring game. I would expect that Seattle's going to have to throw the ball all game. Not necessarily all game, but a lot, you know what I mean? Unless something drastically changes. They're without Tyler Lockett this week. I don't think that makes you fade Geno Smith if he's your clear-cut QB1. I don't think you need to worry about it that much, but it's certainly going to play a role. It's certainly going to hurt that offense a tad, but I think the volume's going to be there for Geno. I think out of those two, you can't go wrong, but I'm going to go Kirk Cousins out of those two.
All right, I like it. I like it. And for me, I would probably go with Gino just because. And I was thinking about this while y'all guys were talking. This Chiefs defense the last couple of weeks has not looked hot right now. I mean, last week they gave up two. I just looked this up. They gave up 2 touchdown passes to Davis Mills. Davis Mills had 2 touchdown passes, which is just incredible
Has
because
he
we
had two
know the
all
Texans.
year? I'm not completely being. I'm not completely joking. Like seriously, that's not even look. As a matter of fact, it's not even look. No.
I mean, he had 13. He had 13, so he two. So he
Oh
came
my
into the game
god.
with 11. So yeah,
I was going to guess
Yeah.
like 10, maybe
It's
10 in
incredible. So
the.
he like 20% of his season total in one game against the
it's
Chiefs.
incredible.
Well, I mean, it's a good point. You
You
didn't
see him,
expect it.
you see him throw two touchdown passes. Then the week before, we saw Russell Wilson have the best game of his season
Yeah.
against this Chiefs defense
Yep.
before he
In
got hurt,
three
and that was
quarters.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was also a situation where they were without Cortland Sutton. So literally,
Mm-hmm.
it was Jerry Judy as the number one option. So I think the game script favors Geno Smith in that.
Yeah.
Okay, he doesn't have Tyler Lockett, but he still got DK. We know DK is going to get his targets, and Goodwin has surprisingly been a very solid wide receiver 3 in that offense.
Mm-hmm.
You combine him and hopefully Kenneth Walker can play. If not, you do have some tight ends that could make some plays here and there. Noah Fant, Will Disley, who's good for like one catch a week or one catch
It's
every
probably a
2 weeks.
touchdown.
Yeah, right. It's probably a touchdown if Will Disley's catching it. So can't go wrong with like you guys say, can't go wrong with neither of those guys. It's just it comes down to preference, right? You
Yeah.
just come down with preference and gut feeling at the end of the day.
Gotta go with that.
Sticking with Kirk Cousins, we're going to continue with Kirk Cousins because he's just the favorite on this pod.
I
Uh,
love Cousin Kirk.
who would you rather start, Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins?
Oh, this is a good one. All the same reasons, obviously, here for Kirk Cousins, and in Jared Goff. Just a part of a scrappy Lions offense, just a scrappy Lions team that has just been tremendously, I think, underrated all season. In this matchup, like I said, all the same things that we had mentioned about Kirk Cousins and his matchup this week. We'll see if maybe they get behind in that game. But Jared Goff at Carolina in this game, in a game that the Lions have been in playoff mode for the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks. and they've been responding extremely well to that high pressure environment. So over 250 yards and a touchdown against a pretty tough Jets defense last week. So it wasn't a great week in terms of Goff's numbers, but the Carolina defense is certainly not the Jets defense. I like Jared Goff in this matchup again because I think that the game script allows for a higher ceiling than Cousin Kurt in this one. So give me Goff in this matchup.
What about you, Harrison? Two NFC North quarterbacks. Which one you like?
Yeah, and it's funny. They kind of have a similar setup offensively.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that they've had success in fantasy this year is they've been high volume throwers. It's
Mm-hmm.
30, 40 pass attempts. It might be a 300-yard game, multiple
Mm-hmm.
touchdowns. They've thrown the ball a lot. So similar thing, neither one is a bad guy to go with. I think a lot of what Keaton said right there is true. I think that, you probably are looking at Jared Goff and saying, this Carolina matchup, it's not the Jets defense. I think that is a more favorable setup for him this week. I think I'm going to lean Kirk Cousins still on this one. And it's funny, you can ask around. I'm not the biggest Kirk Cousins guy in general. When they
That makes
drafted
two of
Kellen,
us.
yeah, when they drafted Kellen Mond, I was like, let's get that rolling. That could be something there as Kirk Cousins' replacement. I just overall have kind of always thought Minnesota has underperformed for how talented their pass catchers have been over the years. I mean, Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen were a duo. Now you got Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, but in this week, in this season, I think Kirk Cousins has been more than rallied for a starting fantasy quarterback, and I'm going to roll with him over Jared Goff. Like I said, the Giants defense is scrappy. It's a better defense than people give it credit for, but I still think that it's a defense that they can take advantage of with their outstanding pass catching duo.
Cannot go wrong. And I think, like we said, these are the decisions that
Yeah, you might
fantasy,
have to make.
managers are going to have to, discuss, and they're going to battle again, back and forth. Like, because we said you can't go wrong with Gino, you can't go wrong with Jared Goff, because like both teams do have stellar running games, but both of these teams also like to throw the ball around the field like they ain't got no sense sometimes. So
Yeah.
both quarterbacks are going to have their opportunities. It's just going to be, I think, with both of these quarterbacks too, is you hope that they don't make that critical mistake, which is
Mm.
that dreaded interception, like they both are capable, of doing from time to time, as we see in this season. Even though Jared Goff's been really good at taking care of the ball this season. I think he was only had like 7 interceptions this season. I think.
I'll say this about Jared Goff too. He's playing for his job right now, and kind of his role as an NFL starter. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
clear cut. The Lions are going to have a good pick with the Rams pick situation. They're going to be in a position to take a quarterback, maybe with their own pick too, later in the draft. So Jared Goff has a lot to play for right now. He's definitely
Mm-hmm.
going to be coming out slinging it.
Most definitely, most certainly. Let's move on to the running backs here. Interesting running back battle that we have here. Isaiah Pacheco versus Leonard Fournette, the rookie running back. Pacheco was starting to make some inroads in that Chiefs backfield, but somehow, some way, again during in the late season, Jerick McKinnon has decided he wants to join the fray and become Chiefs running back one. So we got him, and then Leonard Fournette. His lack of success this season has been a microcosm of just how bad this season has been for the Bucks offensively. So that being said, fellas, who do you like? Who are you starting?
Hmm. Yeah, this was a particularly tough one for me. Leonard Fournette has had double digit games in every game except for two, I think, this year. When I'm looking at this, yeah. So except for two games, he was hurt against Cleveland, but he's been consistently at around that 10 to 12 mark, 10 to 15. Let's see what he averaged. So he averaged 14.7 due to a kind of a hotter start to the season, but that's what you're going to get out of Leonard Fournette in this game. It's 10 to 12 points. It's hard for me to see outside of that. And with Pacheco, seemingly has fallen into the Andy Reid running back thing that he does with running backs, and you all as Philadelphia
Running
fans
back
don't
by
have to
running back by
explain
committees.
anything about how frustrating that can be from a fantasy perspective. Pacheco is certainly a highly talented guy and an offense that has a bunch of other high talent weapons as well. So you kind of do the math and say, of course, there's high upside here, but it's really, do I want my guaranteed 10 points on the board with Leonard Fournette, or possibly 5 points with Isaiah Pacheco, or 15 or 20, potentially if the game script goes right. Give me Leonard Fournette. As much as that bores me to say that in this matchup, Give me Fournette here because it's the playoffs. If I'm still in it, I need consistency out of whoever I'm starting out of these two. So give me Fournette.
Can't go wrong with playoff Lenny. Can't go wrong with playoff Lenny. What about you, Harrison Pacheco, a guy who you've been talking about for weeks, or are we going to the old wily veteran that could eventually just have a good game? He has a favorable matchup against the Cardinals this week, but Pacheco has a very good matchup against the Seahawks this week. Both running backs were very good matchups, uh, going head to head right now for Week 16.
Yeah, it is two favorable matchups. I mean, I think you can't go wrong with either matchup. I'll say last week, Isaiah Pacheco had a good matchup versus Houston. That was certainly a good play. Seth came on here and talked about that. I doubled down on it, and he wound up with 8.7 points. Not really in a bad outing. I mean, 15 rushes for 86 yards. I'm not mad about that from a pure football standpoint. You know what I
Right.
mean? Pretty solid outing. But in a fantasy playoff game where there's a lot of other running backs you're trying to look for, 8.7 just doesn't cut it. It's definitely a hit. Keaton mentioned it. That Andy Reid running back room, I mean, we've known about it forever, 20 plus years. He likes to rotate guys, likes to mix in different guys. Same thing in Tampa. Rashad White has definitely cut out a legit role in that Buccaneers offense. Surprisingly enough, and it's kind of Pacheco's downfall right now that he doesn't have a role in the passing game. Leonard Fournette, has really established himself in fantasy this year. His role in fantasy has been as a PPR pass catching back. Leonard Fournette's best games have been when he's had 4 or 5 catches for 30, maybe a touchdown. That has kind of propelled him, just being a guy that Brady can dump it off to real quick. He's still that physical, bruising runner that he always was, that he was with the Jaguars. It's just back in the day with the Jaguars, he had no role in the passing game. You know what I mean? Blake Bortles was not looking for Leonard Fournette. Tom Brady is. So that's been his role. I'm going to go with Leonard Fournette in this one as well. I think it's a favorable matchup out there versus Arizona, especially because they're going with Trace McSorley this week. That offense is going to have some problems most likely. I mean, hey, good luck to the former Penn State quarterback, guy that a lot of people around here will root for. But in all likelihood, the Buccaneers should have a lead. They should be able to run the ball, and I think that will favor Leonard Fournette. So I'm going to go with Leonard Fournette in that one. But again, two talented guys.
Very too talented guys. And Pacheco, you just look at how he's performed in his last, you want to say his last 5 games. Last 5 games, he's averaging 79.6 rushing yards per game on 15 carries a game, which is not bad. Uh, Not bad for him. The only issue is he's only scored 2 touchdowns over that span, which does not help the fantasy value because we need touchdowns. If you're not getting 100 rushing yards, you need touchdowns. However, if you're thinking about betting on Pacheco, his over under for rushing yards this week against the Seahawks over 68 and a half. So could be a play there if you are thinking about putting some money on Pacheco.
He's been sitting right about there.
That burrito this week.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, that is a good burrito bet.
he's been there. So we got him. Last up at the running back spot, AJ Dillon versus Jamal Williams. Again, we have a backup, not backup in Green Bay, RB2 in Green Bay, who probably would be an RB1 in other teams. If we want to be blatantly honest, versus a guy who is just a touchdown machine. It doesn't matter where he's at in that red zone; they're going to find a way to give it to him, and he's going to score. He's not really a volume guy where he's going to give you like 100 yards a game. He's more so red zone. He's going to give you and get you touchdowns. So, who are we starting? AJ Dillon versus the Dolphins defense, or Williams versus the Panthers defense?
That whole role from Williams used to scare me earlier in the year and frustrate me also as a DeAndre Swift owner. But like the role used to scare me a little bit, considering some of his biggest games, some of his most productive fantasy games came in games in which he had 50 yards, 64 yards, or 64 yards. Another one where he had 108 in that one, but another one 87 yards, right? So the role was not huge in terms of him getting a ton of carries, as you mentioned. It was more so really about touchdowns. So the touchdowns are the hardest thing. You listen to any NFL analyst will tell you this. They're the hardest thing to predict about what a player will do. It's easier to say, well, get this many carries, this many yards. And it seems as though his role as getting, somewhere between 12 to 20 carries, well, 20 is a little bit much, so 12 to 15, let's say, carries a game on average or so seems to be pretty consistent. The idea that he's going to get somewhere around 60, 70, 80 yards, maybe on a good day, is pretty consistent. But the touchdowns are going to come in seemingly in bunches for Jamal Williams, which makes him a boom or bust play in this particular situation. Still, with A.J. Dillon, he has up and down games as well, but when A.J. Dillon is the man for that day, he is the man, and it becomes clear that he takes on that entire role. So I'd feel more comfortable if I have to throw a dart at one of those other two, at the guy that has a higher chance at being the man in this case, which is A.J. Dillon.
I like it. I like it. AJ Dillon had a very good game against the Rams on Monday night. I think he had 2 touchdowns in that
Yep.
game. So again, somebody being productive in that running back room, because both of those guys get yards, but they somehow again they don't score touchdowns. But he was able to score a touchdown. So what about you, Harrison? Who do you like, Dillon or Jamal Williams, who was looked at earlier in the season as the touchdown vulture?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny we wound up with those two because Jamal Williams was kind of the original second tier, second running back with the Packers, that
Mm-hmm.
physical change of pace guy. Exactly what AJ Dillon is now. I mean, they've always been similar players. They kind of have that physical, real tough mentality. If you're running Aaron Jones at a defense and then you switch it up and throw Jamal Williams or AJ Dillon out there, or DeAndre Swift for Jamal Williams' case now, it's certainly going to be a good thing. Like you said, we've seen AJ Dillon really start to get going these past 3 games in particular. All of them above 17 points. The past 2 games above 20 points. You mentioned it, 2 touchdowns last week. Encouraging for me, he started to get some value in the pass game. 3 catches in each of those games, over 25 yards, and that really helps his case a lot. I think that's going to kind of be his role. You're never going to see AJ Dillon be a 25 carry guy, even a 20 carry guy. He hasn't touched that 20 carry mark this year. But if he can get involved in the passing game, I think that's kind of his role. Out of this one, it's a tough one. You really could go either way right here. I mean, like I said, they're very similar players in a similar role, kind of similar to Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff at the quarterback position, how they throw the ball out. These are 2 guys in a similar role. They're the second running back, but they're a physical, great way to change the pace. Both coaches like to use them. They have an established role. I think Jamal Williams has a little bit more touches to him. AJ Dillon has a little bit more upside to him. AJ Dillon has more upside to go score. AJ Dillon has more upside to catch more passes because we know what DeAndre Swift is in the pass game. So I'm going to go with AJ Dillon in this one. I think that if you're starting Jamal Williams this week, I'm not panicking. You know what I mean? I think that him being a guy who's getting double-digit carries every week, you're hoping he falls in the end zone like he did 4 weeks
Like
in
he
a
always
row.
does. Right.
4 weeks in a row from week 10 to week 13, 4 games in a row, he falls in the end zone. The
You can't
past 2
ignore
weeks,
that.
he hasn't. You need him to fall back in the end zone. The past 2 weeks, him not falling in, if he falls in the end zone with 15 plus touches, Jamal Williams is going to get you to a fantasy championship just fine. The upside there, I'm going to go with A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, I would agree. I would lean towards the upside with Dillon. Like you said, with Williams, you're really harboring on him to fall into the end zone, because outside of that, you're not getting 100-yard or even sometimes a 70-yard performance out of him. He's going to get the volume, but he's not going to give you the explosive plays out of the backfield. So definitely agree with y'all all with the running backs. We got a couple more players, matchups we're going to talk about before we jump into anytime touchdown picks here on the Total Sports Live podcast. Let's go to wide receivers, fellas. Let's go with this one here. We're going to call this the Keaton special here.
The Mike on Mike.
The Mike on Mike. Michael Pittman versus Mike Williams. This is a good one because Michael Pittman was looked at as like he's going to break out this year in fantasy. He hasn't really done so, more so because of the quarterback situation in Indianapolis with them rotating multiple quarterbacks. Now Nick Foles is getting a start. And Mike Will been hurt, but now he's healthy, and he's looking like the Mike Will we saw earlier this season. In a game that both of these teams are going to play each other, and who would you rather have? Michael Pittman versus the Chargers defense, which is improving, or Mike Williams against the Colts defense that just got obliterated the last couple weeks by the Cowboys offense and the Vikings offense?
Yeah, the Mike on Mike special. You gotta love this. Both these guys have given you concern about starting them in your lineup for very different reasons. So it's a great Mike on Mike matchup here for Would You Rather. Mike Williams looked good last week with the Chargers. Like you said, he's healthy, and when Mike Williams is healthy, it gives you just this tremendous burst of confidence that he's going to do something very productive. I'm concerned though because whenever I get my hope up into Mike Williams like that, that's usually the setup for a downfall. You got to go to Mike Williams on like a random. He's had like 2 weeks when he's been at 3 points, 4 points, and then boom, he comes out with a 38-point performance. So, do the numbers pour into that? Am I superstitious on that based upon how Mike Williams has typically operated? Yes, I absolutely am. But he had 10.7 last week against Tennessee. He looked good as well, so I'm not really sure which way to go. Michael Pittman, if I had the choice out of those two, of course not many people do, but if you had the choice out of those two, give me Pittman against a Chargers defense that has been bad mostly through on the ground. They've been okay through the air as well. But I think in a system where Nick Foles is going to be looking for his tallest and bestest receiver, and an RPO maybe style thing that they're going to be running over there, I think Pittman gets into the end zone, which makes the difference between here. I don't know if Mike Williams gets into Mike Williams might get into the end zone 4 times,
Literally,
but he
literally.
also could have 4 yards. So give me Michael Pittman Jr. because again, this is playoffs. I need points.
All right, all right. Playoffs need points. You're going with Michael Pittman. What about you, Harrison? Who you riding with, Mike Will or Michael Pittman?
Yeah, I'm gonna roll matchup here and just go ahead and say that Michael Pittman has the better matchup. I think Mike Williams is probably gonna face a lot of Stephon Gilmore, and it's not Patriots Stephon Gilmore, but it's still Stephon Gilmore. That's a
That's a good
respectable
one.
corner that you definitely don't want to be lining up against all week. I've talked a lot on this show. Maybe you're not fading this matchup. Maybe you're not fading this matchup. I still fade Stephon Gilmore a little bit, man. I still I'm a little bit more timid when I know that the team is playing him. So I think Michael Pittman has the better matchup. Like we said, he had a nice week last week versus Minnesota in that crazy game. 10 catches for 60 yards. Like to see him at 14 targets. I'm also the wrong guy to fade Nick Foles, man. I'm always going to roll with anybody playing with Nick Foles.
Foles forever.
You know what I mean? He proved himself to me back in 2017, 2018. I'm good. You know what I mean? Nick Foles, their starting quarterback. I like it. I think it's going to boost Michael Pittman's stats. I don't know if that's factual. That might be some Philly bias right there, but yeah, I'm not fading Michael Pittman because Nick Foles is in. I don't think that that's the concerningest part of this Colts offense this season. I think when they were transitioning from Frank Reich to Jeff Saturday and Sam Ellinger was starting games, I think that might have been some times to fade Michael Pittman. But I don't think transition from Matt Ryan to Nick Foles is anything to really be scared about. So I'm going to go matchup, and just my overall love of Nick Foles is also going to play into that pick.
I can't disagree. They're very good, compelling arguments. I think it's also going to be tough too because when you look at the fantasy matchup for both of these defenses against wide receivers, the Colts are allowing the seventh fewest points to wide receivers, and the Chargers allowing the eighth fewest points to wide receivers. So
right there next to each other are going to be a great
they're
matchup.
neck and neck against each other. So it's going to be a tough decision for a lot of people to make because you're looking at Mike Williams and Michael Pittman in that wide receiver 2 territory.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be splitting hairs. You hope it don't come down to that because that's a Monday night game. So you hoping it don't come down to that, but it just might. So
A decision that will torture you throughout the weekend.
likely, I hope not. Hopefully you're comfortably up in your matchup, so you don't have to depend on one of those guys to bring you home in a championship win or to move on to the championship round. And last but not least, tight end position. Two guys who have been rising over the last few weeks. One guy's been much a star throughout the season, surprisingly. And this is Chigakonkwo versus Jawan Johnson.
Mm.
Who are you starting? A very intriguing matchup just because, again, Titans are looking for receivers. Treylon Burks has returned to practice, so that's a good sign for them. However, you cannot discredit what Chigakonkwo and Austin Hooper have been able to do, in the last couple of weeks. And then on the other side, you have Jawan Johnson, who all he does is score touchdowns.
That's it.
He scored touchdowns last week against the Falcons, and he continues to score touchdowns. And he has a matchup this week against the
Cleveland.
who did they
Yep,
play?
Browns.
The Browns.
Mm-hmm.
Play the Browns this week, and the Browns are not great. They give tight ends issues. They're allowing the eighth fewest points to tight ends this season. But however, it doesn't match up. It just seems like Jawan Johnson is matchup proof because we said that against the Niners and he goes out and scores a touchdown against the Niners. So who are y'all taking in this matchup?
Well, you guys know I can't go away from my guy at this point in the year. Here we are in week 16, and the get Jawan Johnson's jersey mission still lives because I said it and I mean it. I said it on camera, so I can't escape that.
No.
If I win this year, I will buy a Jawan Johnson jersey for that very clutch performance he had for me earlier this year. So I'm not going to go away from him, but you do bring up a good point about the matchup. If you're a matchup person, if you're looking at this and saying I got to make this decision based upon the matchup, then it's a tough matchup. I think for Juwan Johnson against the Browns, you don't necessarily love that, but he's been so matchup proof that how can you go away from that? Play the hot streak, 2 touchdowns last week. Maybe he finds the end zone again this week at least one more time. So I'm going JJ for the win, Juwan Johnson.
Jawan Johnson. All right, he's going Jawan Johnson. Are you going Jawan Johnson, Harrison, or are you going with the rookie Chiga Conquo, who's starting to blow up in fantasy over the last couple of weeks?
Listen, Jawan Johnson. Keaton's talking about Jawan Johnson as a Jersey guy, like a jersey you wear. I'm talking about Jawan Johnson as a Jersey guy, like Glassboro, New Jersey, South Jersey. Let's go. So, I got to roll with Jawan Johnson, man. That's a Jersey guy. I've always liked Jawan Johnson. He was a receiver back at Penn State. Has always been a pass catching guy.
And then he went to Oregon, right?
Yeah, he
went
did.
To Oregon
he
right
went to Oregon
afterwards.
as well. Yeah. I've always thought that he had the upside, and that transition to tight end. Anytime a receiver goes to tight end, he's going to be a natural pass catcher, going to have a little bit cleaner route, just a little bit more of a nuanced, view of the position. So I've always thought Juwan Johnson had a lot of upside. Been nice to see it kind of come to fruition this year. Hoping that maybe the Saints can get a little bit more stable at quarterback and just offensively overall, and then maybe they can really get some stuff going with him next year. But yeah, I'm gonna roll with Jawan Johnson. That's a Jersey guy. Got to roll with him. Chiga Conquo, guy that Jovan mentioned last week, really brought him to my attention when you mentioned that here on the pod. I started looking into him a little bit more in fantasy. Really, really stable the past 3 weeks. Over 10 points each week. A guy that you can roll out. Favorable matchup versus Houston. Has really stepped in a strange way with Treylon Burks being a receiver, but you really start to think about it. Treylon Burks is a physical guy, plays in the slot a lot. Chiga Conquo is a physical tight end. They're not, you know what I mean? It kind of makes sense how that works out. Where okay, Treylon Burks is out. Who are we going to go to? Well, we got this physical tight end right here. Let's throw the ball to him a little bit more. So I think that he's an interesting flex play, but I can't go away from the Jersey guy. Keaton's going to get his jersey. I love to hear that. I'm going to need to see that once that happens.
All around,
yeah, right. Juwan Johnson for me.
I can't disagree, right? It's hard to disagree when someone is scoring touchdowns all the time, and that is Jawan Johnson because all he does is score touchdowns. He has 7 touchdowns this season.
Incredible.
7, and has scored 5 in his last 5 games, with 2 coming last week against the Falcons. So Jawan Johnson,
7 more touchdowns than Deontay Johnson. But let's
that's a hey. Deontay might score a touchdown this week. It might just happen.
Stop it.
He might just happen. I'm just saying.
Stop it. Come on.
He's due. I'm just saying it might happen. I mean, I did that one week and got burnt, but it was close.
Who is he this year? Miles Sanders. He's this year's Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
Hey, Alvin Kamara from last year.
Oh God. Well, Alvin Kamara's just been
this year
Alvin
too.
Kamara's been bad
this year. Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that in fantasy a few days ago.
Speaking of touchdowns.
Yeah, Speaking of touchdowns, it's time to wrap up the pod here. And you already know how we wrap up the pod with. It's a tradition like any other or like no other in sports podcasts, and that is the Anytime Touchdown segment. Last week, we struggled. I mean, we were on the struggle bus hard. 0 for 8. And it wasn't because we picked bad picks. Just the game script didn't work out in our manner, Jawan Johnson scored touchdowns, taking touchdowns away from Alvin Kamara.
In this category more.
Really should.
Zonovan Knight couldn't find the end zone. George Pickens didn't find the end zone. Elijah Moore didn't find the end zone, but that's because Zach Wilson's that quarterback. No shade to Zach Wilson. But, yeah, 0 for 8, but that's okay. We were due to have a down week just because we've been flying high the last few weeks. So that just means we got a clean slate to knock some things out and give you guys the picks that you need to have this week for fantasy. So, fellas, week 16, anytime touchdown picks. Who do you like this week?
Harrison, you got your boy Amon
We're
Ra. You want
rolling
you want to
here.
start
Yeah.
with him? Yeah, go ahead, start with
Listen,
him
if
because I
we're
got
starting
two
with
on
Amon
mine.
Ross St. Brown, I'm
Because
ready
that's
to
actually
roll.
my guy, but like I'm gonna let you have him this week. You know what I mean? Like I've been on Amon
You
Ra
know,
since week 10 of
it's funny.
2021. I'm just saying.
I took you. I took your guy last week in the same matchup. I took George Pickens versus Carolina, and it
I
kind of burnt me to.
heard. Yeah,
Yeah, it kind of burned me to some extent. There was a few plays though, man. He had that nice catch down the sideline. The
yeah.
problem was, man, I shouldn't have rolled with Mitch Trubisky in that game. That's where I got burned. I thought Mitch Trubisky playing
Anytime you're saying
Carolina.
to yourself, "I'm rolling with Mitch Trubisky,"
Exactly.
just know that nothing will go right. Nothing
So I'm
will
gonna
go
roll from
right.
Mitch Trubisky to another former first round mid range quarterback to Jared Goff. I'm gonna say that Jared Goff gets Amon-Ra St. Brown the ball. This is something we talked about pre-show with this. They also have DJ Shark. There's just a little bit more to that offense. I think the JC Horn might be moving around a little bit. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is an interesting matchup down there. I think that they're going to look to throw the ball out in that game. That's one of the reasons we like Jared Goff in our quarterback segment. So I like Amon-Ra St. Brown there. And then I got two rookies to mention. I'm going to start with Drake London versus Baltimore. I'm intrigued by that matchup. I think that last week they threw him the ball maybe more times than they had thrown him the ball all year. That they're really
Mm-hmm.
looking to get him the ball. I think coming out of the bye week, it's something they put a point of emphasis on with Desmond Ritter taking over. Let's see what this duo is. Let's see if they have any chemistry together. I think that's only going to continue. We all know that Drake London is going to be a physical, athletic threat down in the red zone. I think they'll look to throw the ball him there. Kyle Pitts has been out for a few weeks. They've had a few weeks to adjust to that. Same type of thing with Treylon Burks being out and Chigakonko going, well, other way around. Tight ends out now. We need someone big and physical to throw the ball into the red zone. How about our 6'4" rookie receiver? How about Drake London? So I don't hate that. I think we could see our first Desmond Ritter and Drake London touchdown. There's another guy, first touchdown. I didn't even mention this pre-show. I think you guys are going to like it, though. How about Malik Willis? Anytime touchdown. How about Malik Willis running into the end zone? Maybe his first touchdown. Maybe, he throws one, but how about Malik Willis getting in the end zone? I think they're going to look for him to score his first touchdown. We've mentioned that he's played a few games now, doesn't have a touchdown yet. Could be their quarterback of the future. I was very high on him last year in the draft. I think, let's see him with some more opportunities. Let's see the offensive playbook open up for him a little bit more. How about Malik Willis, anytime touchdown? And I'm willing to bet that there's good odds on that. So I'm willing to bet that that's pretty favorable.
It probably will be. I haven't seen anything out for that game yet, but I'm pretty sure it will likely be in
It's
that
a good one. Yeah.
plus 300, 400 range,
He's
likely
got
for
a
that
lot
game.
of
So,
he's got a lot to prove this week. Like
Yep.
yes.
Tannehill just announced he's not coming back for the rest of the year. This is a playoff caliber team. What does he do with that opportunity? They haven't given him the keys, but the keys are his now. And so what does he do with that game? I think it's a big prove it game for Malik. I like that pick.
Huge prove it game for Malik, and I think it's going to be fun to watch because like we said, he looked better in last week's game, which gives you hope, and I think gives a lot of us hope that want to see him succeed, that he could put it together next week if he does what he needs to do. So love the picks: Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Malik Willis. What about you, Keaton? Who are some of you guys that you
Solid lineup. Yeah.
want to spend some burrito money on this
Hey,
week?
mine are very smart and simple picks. My analysis on this is going to be very simple for both of these. Okay, I want you to name the last time that the Chargers didn't allow a running back to score a touchdown. I think I scored a touchdown this season on the Chargers. I may have scored two, but I got to check the stats. Like it's literally everyone. So Colts, Chargers on Monday night. It's going to be a running back heavy game, and I'm just speaking that part into existence for one Austin Eckler to bring me home a championship. But it's going to be a running heavy game. Certainly, it should be, at least if you're the Indianapolis Colts and facing what may be the worst running defense in the league. Give me Deion Jackson in this matchup, not Zach Moss, because I think that he's going to be the one that has more opportunities up the middle to score, where this Chargers defense has been the weakest. Run defense has been the weakest, so give me Deion Jackson to score one. And also on the other side of the ball here, not other side of the ball rather, but going up north, or not so far up north, to the Bills. Devin Singletary in this game, he came through for me really clutch last time. I mean, like, really, really clutch. I believe in Devin Singletary and his ability to get into the end zone. Maybe not all year. Maybe not. He's not like a top flight guy. But I think that the situation against who they're playing Chicago this week, a
Yes.
defense that has also stopped exactly no one this year on the ground. So give me
24 rushing
some.
touchdowns.
Yeah, they're at Chicago as well. It's going to be cold up there. Buffalo's used to that kind of thing, but I think they keep it on the ground here, and I think that just gives Devin Singletary a huge, huge opportunity to find himself in the end zone this weekend. I think both of those guys are really good picks for burrito money this weekend.
Like it, Devin Singletary, Deion Jackson. The last time we saw Jackson get extended reps was early season where he had like 10 receptions out of the
Mm-hmm.
backfield. So he also adds that added element of receiving game, which Zach Moss doesn't, which could be the deciding factor, in that particular matchup. So excited to see both of those guys. And then for me, anytime touchdown picks, I'm going DK Metcalf here. I'm not going to overthink this. I did that last week and totally got burnt on it. The Chiefs give up the most touchdowns of wide receivers this year, 19. No Tyler Lockett. They need to get the ball to DK here in this spot. I think they're gonna find a way to get DK the ball, get into the end zone to try to keep the playoff hopes alive right now because it's on the thread. So I like DK Metcalf to score a touchdown here. Also like Geno Smith over 1.5 touchdown passes too against this Chiefs defense, which has been suspect. So I like that this week. Malik Willis, Harrison already said that's one of my guys too. I think he's going to find a way on his legs, especially since the Texans just get ran over by Derrick Henry every time, rushing for over 200 yards. I think Malik Willis, they will use his legs to score a touchdown there to get him in the end zone. So I like Malik Willis. And then last but not least, going back to that Bears Bills game. We're picking the same games this week, so I guess that's a good sign. Going Bears and Bills this week. I'm going Josh Allen to score anytime touchdown, with the Bears giving up 8 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks this season. They gave up 3 last week to Jalen Hurts inside the red zone, inside the red zone, including that one where the defense just parted like the Red Sea and it was just wide open going down the field. So those are anytime touchdown picks for this week here on the pod. Again, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Malik Willis, Devin Singletary, Deion Jackson, DK Metcalf, and Josh Allen here on the pod. Again, as always, make sure you line shop. We're not telling you guys to parlay these things, play them on a single ticket. We're not telling you to play all of them. Pick what you like, pick and choose, win some burrito money on this holiday season, and be all right. Be
There
all
you
right.
go. Simple. Keep it simple, guys.
Very simple. So that's about it here on the podcast. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in as always to the pod as we are wrapping up. Well, not wrapping up because we're going into week 16, but as you get prepared to week 16, putting those lineups in again, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. Make sure you're following the fellas on Twitter as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see the little scroll bar down at the bottom that says make sure to follow those guys. Harrison at Harry Brown-Russo. Keaton at Keaton D Nichols on Twitter as well. Make sure you check out TotalSportsLive.com. Also, make sure you subscribe to the pod on your various streaming platforms: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast, it's pretty much somewhere there in the atmosphere. So make sure you go check out the podcast on those things. And I'm pretty sure that's about it, fellas. Anything else that I missed before we wrap up this pod for this week?
Good luck in the
Well,
championship round.
yeah, absolutely. Good luck in the championship round. And I'll just say, what kind of podcast host, co-host, and friend would I be if I didn't wish my good buddy Jovan a happy early birthday coming up here down the line. By the time you hear this, we might be celebrating. Jovan might be doing whatever birthday shenanigans that entails. But just a good happy birthday to you, man. Hope it's a good year.
Echo
Appreciate
that,
you for
yes.
everything. Always fun coming on here and podding with you and just you know getting down and dirty in the sports media business in general. So happy birthday, my friend.
Appreciate it.
Well said. Well
Appreciate it.
said. Echo that same sentiment, man. Hardest working podcast host.
Oh
we
my
got right here.
goodness. Oh my goodness. If y'all
Please.
only knew, if y'all only saw the outlines and the documents and technical support before the show, trying to help me with my microphone. This guy does it all, man. Editing the articles. It's just this is the guy right here, man. We wouldn't be here without him. So
Amen.
I appreciate the kind words, but I am no one. I'm just the key to the cog in the machine
hey,
to
And
get
humble
everything
too.
done.
that's
He's
why he's the
humble
best
too.
right there. So you know,
So again, appreciate everyone for tuning into the podcast. We might be back next week. We'll see how schedules align. Anything we might be able to get a guest on as well for next week. So if we do one next week, but if we
Stay
don't do a
tuned.
pod next week. We will see you guys in the new year. We'll be talking about the real playoffs at that point,
yeah.
as our show transitions from fantasy talk as we get out of fantasy season to general NFL talk, which I think is just going to be just as exciting if you've been joining us here on the
For
pod
sure.
throughout the season talking fantasy. So, for me, Keaton and Harrison, everyone have a good one. Have a happy holidays. Have a happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas, and Happy Kwanzaa if you celebrate all those things. Everyone have a good one, and we will talk to you all very soon.